I unplugged this thing for the sake of this video. I hope you guys are happy.
I can be quite biased to Sony sometimes. I mean, nowadays I definitely try to branch out more, but PS1 was the first console I played on and no one can forget their roots, you know? But really, the thing I can thank, or blame, whichever you prefer, for this bias is my favorite console, the PS2. While this console isn't exactly alive anymore, PS2 was still huge during its golden years. So many great exclusives and fun games to play on the system overall, so it should come as no surprise that, being my favorite console, it would have some of my favorite games on it. But before we get to that, I'd like to make a few rules clear. First of all, I'm only going to be accepting games that have been localized in English, so no Japanese-only games. Second, I will be accepting multi-platform games as long as I experienced it on the PS2. However, if a game originally on the PS2 was ported to a later generation console and I played that version instead of the original, I will count it. Now then, feel free to join me as I revisit some of my favorite gems from this diamond of a console.
All these gemstones.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Licensed games were a big part of my childhood. If I liked a series or a cartoon or whatever, chances are I wanted to own any video games related to that medium. And ironically, the first licensed game on this list is a game I don't own. How did that happen? So yeah, I really liked The Simpsons back in the day. And while I've only played 2 Simpsons games in total, I can say with some confidence none of the others would come even close to the fun I had with the Simpsons Hit Run. If I were to describe the game's basic idea to you, it's basically GTA with a Simpsons coat of paint. Of course, the overworlds are nearly as large as in GTA, but that's really the gist of it. In this game, you play as the characters from the series, completing all kinds of missions throughout Springfield, ranging from street racing to collecting different items and destroying enemy vehicles. And the main appeal of the game is in these wacky missions, as well as in the freedom you have with each of the 7 overworlds. Well, I say 7, but there's actually only 3. There's also a story of an alien invasion through this thing called Buzz Cola, but that's not important. What is important though is that this game manages to keep the charm of the original series while parodying GTA while still being a great game on its own. Hit and Run might be a huge nostalgia trip for me, but it definitely holds up to this day, both as a Simpsons game and as a licensed game in general.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
As a kid, I had this phase when I was obsessed with realistic racing games. Don't really know why, but looking back, I played some fun games back then, well, mostly. I do know where this obsession sprung from though, namely from a little street racing series called Burnout. In Burnout, you race on the streets of different cities like a normal street racer. What makes Burnout unique though is the sheer amount of carnage that occurs in these races. Crashing into obstacles is an everyday occurrence along with explosions and takedowning your opponents by causing them to crash. And my favorite of these games is Burnout Revenge. Since the Burnout games are pretty similar when it comes down to it, the main reason why Revenge is my favorite is because I have the fondest memories with it. And while these games do come with their certain level of frustration, given how easy it is to crash, the amount of satisfaction that comes from causing all kinds of carnage in the different game modes is fucking amazing. Revenge even adds to this feeling by introducing the revenge takedowns. If you're taken down by a rival car in a race, that car will become marked for revenge. And if you manage to take down the car in question later, you get a special revenge takedown. So essentially it's like the revenge kills from TF2, except with cars. And it makes an already satisfying mechanic even more so. Add in all kinds of different and cool game modes, both old and new to the series, and a bunch of different cars to use however you like, and you've got a street racing game keeping you entertained for hours to come.
Like a million recognize them all.
Here's a fun fact about me. I'm a twin! The reason I bring this up is because we played a lot of video games together growing up with my brother, but since it was mostly single-player games, we had to take turns. This is why games with co-op became particularly interesting to us, and there were 2 co-op games on PS2 that me and my brother still love to this day, and they're both licensed games. Awesome! I know Over the Hedge isn't exactly the most beloved movie out there, but if you played the licensed game based on it, I think you can agree that it's a pretty fun game. The game is a beat-em-up collectathon where you take control of the characters from the movie. The gameplay consists of missions where your objective is to get to the end of the level while beating down other animals controlled by the exterminator. And honestly, the game has a pretty solid level design as well, combining stealth and platforming segments with exploration and combat. And considering most of the levels are just infiltrating human residences, the game does a great job of making the levels feel apart from each other. The combat can get a little repetitive, but you can still experiment with it enough for it to not feel like a button masher, especially with how many enemy types you end up facing. The story is also pretty interesting, as it serves as a direct continuation to the movie rather than retelling the story. I mean, there's only so much you can do with a bunch of animals trying to steal food from humans, and the story isn't exactly deep or anything, but it's fairly enjoyable either way. Add in some enjoyable minigames and decently funny writing, and you've got a very enjoyable co-op licensed game for all ages. Well done, Activision!
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Now this seems very familiar. It's like I talked about a certain other demon-slaying hack-and-slash game only a few months ago. What are the odds of... Oh wait, it's the same game. Oops. So if you saw my last countdown, you should probably know why DMC3 is on here. But for the sake of those who only just got here, let me elaborate. Dantes Awakening is one of the most ball-busting games you will ever play, but it's also one of the most fun. The satisfaction you get from cutting down a legion of enemies or beating a hard boss that was giving you trouble is quite... whitewashing. And I don't mean any of that political shit. So yeah, the game's hard, but also satisfying and smooth. Then how about the story? Well, when you really get down to it, it's a pretty simple story with the 2 half-demon brothers duking it out for the fate of the human world. But it's a fairly enjoyable one nonetheless, and also rather interesting. And we have the coolest version of Dante as the protagonist, which is just 10 out of 10 stuff right out of the gate. Well, I guess there's also Virgil, Lady, and Arkham. They're pretty cool too, I guess. The difficulty of the series might have turned me away from this game for the longest time, but I couldn't be happier I finally got to play it. Devil May Cry 3 is truly one of the PS2's finest, and arguably one of, if not the most fun game on the system. The bottom line is that you shouldn't do what I did and go play this game. Right now.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
I can't think of a clever way to start off this segment, so... Metal Gear Solid 3.
Oops. Yeah, another game I played pretty recently, but can you blame me? Snake Eater is most definitely one of the top games on PS2, and I think a lot of you can agree with me there. For someone who is pretty split in the middle about Metal Gear after playing 3 games in the series, MGS3 came in just at the right time. Let's just say it feels really good when a game surpasses already your fairly high expectations. As chronologically the first game in the series, MGS3 pretty much lays the groundwork for the rest of the series to follow with its story. And the story itself is a damn good one, following Naked Snake on a mission to stop the development of a new, devastating weapon. And as a prequel, Snake Eater also answers some questions you might have had when playing the earlier games in the series. The gameplay is also super deep. One of the main things that makes this game so appealing is the addition of realism as a gameplay mechanic, with things like getting hungry and having to eat, and treating wounds if you get severely damaged in combat. No disobedient horses here, just an honest-to-good, genius gameplay mechanic. Add in vastly improved writing when compared to the previous games and some pretty great characters, and Metal Gear Solid 3 is pretty much a tight package of some PS2 goodness. If you're someone who was turned off from Metal Gear because of the first two games, I'd still highly recommend you give this game a go. Who knows, it might surprise you. It sure as hell did me.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
The PS2 has been regarded to be one of the best consoles in terms of RPGs. Just a quick look at the library will give you games with hours worth of fantasy adventures. I unfortunately wasn't a part of it when I first got my PS2, but I've definitely come to appreciate these RPGs nowadays, and there are still many I want to try out in the future. But for now, let's talk about Kingdom Hearts. So for those who aren't aware, Kingdom Hearts is a crossover of quite many things actually, but most prominently a Disney Square and a hack and slash RPG cross. And while everything doesn't always mix up perfectly, the games are still a ton of fun, and I feel that Kingdom Hearts 2 exemplifies this the best. What makes this game so fun for me is its combat. While it isn't quite as tight as, say, Devil May Cry 3, KH2's combat system is still very satisfying with its flashy moves and overall fast-paced action. Not to mention, the improvements made to the system from the first game, like the zoomed out camera and Sora having faster movement speed, might seem small at first, but they make the gameplay more fun than you may realize. Plus, the drive forms are literally the best thing ever. Unless you get anti-form. Fuck that little shit. The game is also easy on both the eyes and ears. With a great art style and visuals, as well as a fantastic score composed by Yoko Shimomura, KH2's presentation is on the top of the game. And yeah, the story is a huge mess. But overall, there's still a lot to be enjoyed in the narrative, like single moments with great writing and somewhat entertaining characters. All in all, Kingdom Hearts 2 hits a lot of right spots for me. It's fun and fast-paced, excels in both visuals and music, and the story keeps me entertained, if not always for the right reasons.
And to think I hated this game just a few years ago despite never having played it. May this be a reminder that our past selves will always do stupid decisions.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Japan is a pretty fascinating country. I mean, sure, they keep giving us all these great video games and also anime titties, but what I mean more is that their culture and mythology is fascinating. And oh so lucky for me, a small studio by the name of Clover Studios delivered us a video game with this very topic as the center in 2006. And it's pretty awesome. So, you guys remember Okami? Considering it's been a while since this game has been mentioned anywhere, I wouldn't blame if you didn't, so let me enlighten you. In Okami, you play as the sun god Amaterasu, Ami for short, who's taken the form of a white wolf. And your mission is to stop the darkness in the world, I guess? Yeah, the game's overall story leaves a bit to be desired, but it makes up for it with some truly epic and memorable moments throughout the narrative. What really makes this game, though, are its gameplay mechanics and gorgeous presentation. Okami's art style is made of Japanese ink art, and combined with the cel-shaded graphics, this game is one of the most beautiful I've ever played. And as for the gameplay, the main draw comes from the ability to use the Celestial Brush, a tool that allows you to manipulate your surroundings by drawing certain symbols. These abilities include, but are not limited to, drawing a line for a powerful slash, a cherry bomb for blowing up enemies and walls, different elemental abilities helpful both in battle and puzzle solving, and literally slowing down time. You should have not given me this power. Add in some varied area and dungeon designs, cool puzzles, characters, and world building filled with Japanese mythos and folklore, and fun bosses that test your brush techniques to their fullest, and you've got a pretty darn great video game overall. A lot of people probably have moved on from Okami, and I won't blame them, I kinda have too. But if you haven't played this game yet, I highly recommend you do so.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
So, technically this is cheating since the PS2 version of this game was never released in Europe, but I never said it had to be released in Europe, and emulators and the 3DS version exists, so Tales of the Abyss. Yay for loopholes! Out of all the Tales games I've played, I feel Abyss is the one which has aged the best. And I'd say the reason lies in the new mechanics Abyss implemented that would later become staples in the series, like free run for more maneuverability and 8 art slots for each character by default. But Abyss does have its own gameplay tweaks to make itself unique as well. There are the capacity cores, which allow you to learn new skills and build the character's stats however you like, and the field of phonons, which allows you to execute powerful elemental versions of your normal arts. However, as with any Tales game, the story and characters are the definite highlight. The story especially because it happens to be my favorite in the series. Oops. It deals with themes such as choosing your own future, finding one's place in the world, and even the dangers of scientific experiments. And combined with a journey of character development, Abyss makes for a great story all throughout. And while the cast isn't quite my favorite, they're still all very interesting and likable. And I mean, this game also includes my favorite character in the series, so bonus points for that! And finally, the presentation is pretty damn solid. The graphics are pretty standard PS2 quality, but it has this good old PS2 RPG feel to it. And the soundtrack is one of Motoi Sakuraba's finest, with a multitude of tracks fitting for different situations in the game. So bottom line, Tales of the Abyss is definitely one of the best RPGs I've played. It's not my favorite Tales game, but you can bet your sweet bippy that I'll praise this game to hell and back regardless. If you have an American PS2 or a 3DS, you know what to do.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Guys, I swear this is the last time this will happen. But can you blame me? Persona 4 was number 1 on my previous list for a reason, and I'm pretty sure at least some of you can agree with me that it's one of the best on the PS2. That, or you just want me to go play a real Shin Megami Tensei game. So yeah, Persona 4 is one of my new favorites. The game is a cross between life simulation and a dungeon crawler RPG, and trust me, they blend together much better than you might originally think. During the life sim portion, you build your relationship with other characters by the use of social links, as well as raise your personality stats to become a better person, and also to start more social links. The dungeon crawling aspect shows up in the form of the TV world, a mysterious world filled with dangerous creatures called shadows. In the TV world, you use your personas to fight the said shadows, explore randomly generated dungeons, and if you're lucky, you might even find a kidnapping victim tormented by his or her shadow self. Lovely. Which brings me nicely along to the game's story and characters. The basic premise of the game is that someone is using the TV world to commit murder by throwing them inside and having the shadows kill them. And when our heroes figure out that the world is causing the deaths, they decide to form a team to find the culprit and save anyone who might be thrown in. And the cast. Ooh boy, this is easily one of my favorite casts of characters in any game. Not only do you get to see more than just one side of them, but they're all relatable and likable to some degree, and they feel like actual people with both their dreams and struggles. And as a cherry on top, the presentation is fantastic. Great voice acting, awesome soundtrack by Shoji Meguro, and solid graphics with some beautifully animated cutscenes in the mix. So yeah, Persona 4 is pretty great, and if you're into RPGs, definitely give this one a shot if you haven't already.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Squeak, squeak! This is a very serious segment opening.
It's been a while since I've talked about this one. The Stuart Little movies are some of the most charming pieces of media I've seen, but along with the 2 first movies, one of my first touches with this universe was Stuart Little 3 Big Photo Adventure on the PS2. The game is all about exploration. As the premise of the game is to replace the pictures in George's photo album, you need to go all around New York and perform certain tasks to take the pictures you need. And while overworlds such as the Littlest Garden, a forest park, and a lake might sound small, these places are huge from a perspective of a little mouse. That's why it's a good thing to have a multitude of different vehicles to traverse the places you go to. And the tasks you need to perform are also quite varied. There are some mission types that are recycled in almost every level, but pretty much every level in the game have their own unique missions and little secrets to find, which utilize different vehicles as well as the costumes you have. I'm not saying all of them are fun, the later golf courses are the literal death of me, but they're overall pretty damn enjoyable. I'd say that, all in all, Stuart Little 3 is a great licensed game. It manages to capture the charm of the movies damn near flawlessly and be a fun collectathon adventure game at the same time. If you really like the movies and haven't played this game yet, just what the heck are you waiting for?
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
So you know how as a child you need to own everything related to some of your favorite TV shows? No? Just me? Well, anyway, the point here is that I was a big fan of the original Ben 10 back in the day, and wouldn't you know it, I wanted the licensed game based on it more than anything I had ever owned. Thankfully, Ben 10 Protector of Earth is one of those fairly well-aged licensed games.
Yay.
Protector of Earth is a beat-em-up game where you play as Ben and use his alien forms to beat up a bunch of different alien mooks while also defeating villains from the show. That alone was a huge selling point for the child me, but it also has co-op? Where can I sign up? The game is also very faithful to its source material. All the voice actors reprise their roles, the story has a lot of elements that make it feel like you're playing through an episode of the show, and each of the alien forms act and play how they do in the show. And the gameplay is fun as well. As a beat 'em up, the game's draw is mostly in the fighting, which is executed by the use of light, heavy, and special attacks, and they can be all comboed together. Defeating enemies also gives you experience, and once the gauge is full, you can purchase a new combo for one of your aliens, meaning that your arsenal will expand further you go through the game. There are also a few collectibles and puzzle elements in the game which utilize the alien form's special abilities, like forearm strength, accelerate speed, and cannonball's balliness. Lastly, the game's cel-shaded art style really fits in with the Ben 10 universe and further solidifies the feeling of playing through the show. So yeah, Protector of Earth is a solid licensed game, and it still manages to be a fun time after all these years, even despite its cheesy title.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
I think I speak for everyone, well, a lot of people at least, that this list wouldn't be complete without at least one game from the PlayStation platformer trio. So with that said, let's talk about Jak 2 Renegade. During recent years, Jak 2 has really gone down in terms of popularity. I mean, people have always complained about some of the game's design choices, particularly the difficulty, but it feels like nowadays, Jak 2 is the black sheep of the series, at least in terms of the games made by Naughty Dog. But that won't change my feelings about this game. I fucking love Jak 2. While some people might think the change in tone from Jak 1 is jarring, I see it as a great way of making the story more detailed and interesting. The story itself is a hit or miss, but personally, I really like this story. A lot of the events in the game can really keep you invested, and you never really know who to trust. The pacing is a bit all over the place, but hey, at least we have Daxter. The gameplay is also improved from Jak 1 in my opinion. You still have your arsenal of moves from the original, but with the addition of guns, the game becomes a bit more combat oriented. And the guns are pretty fun to use, even if you're going to use one more than the others. And the mission structure also works really well. I'm not going to say the missions are perfect, not even fucking close, but there's definitely more good than bad here with things like the jetboard missions, missions with a bunch of mooks to take down between the platforming, and great platforming challenges like Mars Tomb. I'm not going to act like Jak 2 is flawless, because it certainly has quite a few of them flaws. But to be frank, I can never see this game as terrible. If you prefer the other Jak games, that's completely understandable. But believe me when I say that even despite all the shit this game has put me through, I still love it nonetheless. Tough love, as they say.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Whoever pitched the idea of a space furry with all kinds of crazy weapons blowing shit up and platforming on different planets through the galaxy, I love you. If you grew up with a PS2 and don't know about Ratchet & Clank, you're missing out because these games are easily some of the most fun in the entire PlayStation library. Nearly every PS2 RNC game could have a fair shot on this list, but Up Your Arsenal has had my heart for what? 11 years now? I'm so fucking old! The thing that makes RNC 3 my favorite is, well, I feel it's the most fun game in the series with a great lineup of weapons, solid level design, and a smooth difficulty curve. But in my opinion, it also perfected everything RNC 2 set out to do and made it even better. Weapons upgrade all the way to level 5, armor shopping is now in a set location rather than on random planets, and the returning weapons from the previous games actually upgrade now. And yeah, the story isn't necessarily anything to write home about, but it's full of charm, character, and layers upon layers of humor. RNC 3 has to be one of the funniest games I've ever played. Be it because of all the crap they got past the radar, or Quark now being more likable and more focused on comic relief, this game never fails to put a smile on my face. And this game also gave us Dr. Nefarious, who's both a great laugh and a threatening villain at the same time. I.e., he's a pretty good villain. Ratchet & Clank 3 might be a relic of my childhood, but I still see it as an excellent game. It's not perfect, because of course it isn't, but it's hard to believe this game is already 13 years old. And in my eyes, it's the best this series has ever gotten.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all.
Me in real life.
This one should be pretty obvious. Given that I talk about Sly Cooper whenever I get the chance, it should come as no surprise to all the viewers that one of the games was going to be pretty high on this list. And if you're new, hello! I really like Sly Cooper. So let's talk about my favorite Sly game, Sly 3. Similar to Ratchet & Clank 3, I feel that Sly 3's strengths come from perfecting the formula that Sly 2 laid out. The main gameplay, going around overworlds and completing missions, is still the same as Sly 2, but it's now sharpened to be more enjoyable, with the overworlds being much easier to get around as every character instead of just Sly. And the new playable characters are great as well. They all bring their own unique styles of gameplay without being too jarring and are pretty fun to play as overall. Which brings me nicely along to the game's story, where Sly must gather new members to his gang, hence the new characters, in order to gain access to the Cooper Vault, his heritage. He could just open the vault with his cane, but someone named Dr. M has taken total control of the island and made it into a heavily guarded fortress. So yeah, need help. The story isn't anything special, but it serves its purpose well, and the characters are more than enough to carry it through. The returning characters all retain their charm from before, and the new ones are also very enjoyable, with notable development to the villains turned good. Except for Dimitri, he just kinda happens. In addition, the interactions between the gang members, particularly the original 3, have been improved from before, making them actually feel like best friends and true companions. I think I've said all that needs to be said because frankly, I could gush about this game for hours. It's my second favorite game for a reason, and I'll always talk about it and the entire series until I fucking die. That's a good premonition of things to come. Okay, here's a few honorable mentions before we get to the top. Sonic Heroes, MotorStorm Arctic Edge, Ancient Hugo, Sly 2 Band of Thieves, Jak 3, Beyond Good and Evil, Crash Tag Team Racing, Cars Race-O-Rama, and Persona 3 FES. From all the games that have already appeared on this list, and considering that PS2 is my favorite console, you can probably guess that the number 1 is also my favorite video game. Some of you might already know what's coming next, but let's stop beating around the bush. Play the music! there's a reason why this is my intro theme. So Dark Chronicle, also known as Dark Cloud 2, is what I consider to be the best in PS2's library. Let's list the reasons, starting with the story. It's not mind-blowingly amazing as far as JRPGs go, but it has a lot of charm, particularly in its characters. And the game's events can really keep you invested in the narrative, since there's always something to keep you on your toes. And for your gameplay experience, Dark Chronicle offers dungeon crawling in randomly generated floors with enemies to fight and treasures to find. But instead of leveling up your characters, you level up your weapons and raise their stats by synthesizing them. And once certain requirements have been met, you can build up the weapon into a stronger form. And since most weapons have more than one option for building up, the amount of different weapons you can build adds to the game's diversity and replay value. Then there's the Georama. Because the main characters are trying to restore the future by rebuilding the past, the game has you do just that. In Georama, you fulfill certain tasks by setting up houses and other resources in certain positions or amounts, which then help restore the area in the future. And you're rewarded from completing the Georama in each area, be it with story progression or some useful items. And to top it all off, the game's OST is just... Tomohito Nishiura's score is godly, with themes that build up atmosphere, make you emotional, get you pumped for battle, or just sound grand and awe-inspiring. I could go on about this game and my experiences with it, but I think I'll leave that for another time. Just know that if there's one game on PS2 that I'd label my favorite, it would definitely be this one.
I'm FinnishDuck, and if the PS4 will be anything as good as the last two Sony consoles, rip my wallet!
In the future we'll decide if there's a hero buried deep inside. I wanna be a hero. Pokemon!
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. It was supposed to be out earlier than this, but what can you do? I'm still working on a few videos I'd like to get out before the end of the year, so hopefully you can still expect a bundle of stuff from me during these last few months. One of them is also an update video on stuff that's going to happen next year on this channel. I hope your bodies are ready.